Welcome to BeyondBIM. We hope you have had a good start to the new year in 2021. We're really excited to kick off the new year with this particular exciting interview. When I first started this podcast, the intention was to cover 7 dimensions that have helped transform and push our industry's discussion beyond BIM. And one of those 7 dimensions was robotics. When we think of robotics today, there's only one company that almost everyone can agree to will come to mind. That is Boston Dynamics. Whether it was their clever spot robot seen on the construction sites or their entertaining Christmas dance performance by robots, Boston Dynamics has remained at the forefront of everyone's news feeds, entertaining us at times and also frightening us at the sheer speed at which robotics has come to in the 21st century. To find out more about the future trajectory of robots in construction, we have sought to seek guidance from Brian Ringley. Brian Ringley is the Construction Technology Manager at Boston Dynamics, where he supports the AECOO customer applications for the Spot platform and also development of new autonomous behavior that adds value to construction project delivery. And whom better to expand on this topic than Brian, who prior to his career at Boston Dynamics was a senior construction automation researcher at WeWork, where he managed the construction robotics research program and contributed to initiatives in design automation and modular prefabrication. And now, if you're as intrigued as me to step into the world of Boston Dynamics, let's hear what Brian has to say on the current state of robotics and its future influence in construction. Brian, can you just start off by telling us a little bit more about yourself and what led you to Boston Dynamics?
Yeah, of course. I actually got my start in architecture. I got an MArch from the University of Cincinnati. I had intended to go into traditional architectural practice, but the recession moved me into fab labs and academia. So I started teaching and I started making connections between BIM and design computation and the ability to drive downstream processes like industrial automation, CNC machining, 3D printing, and industrial robotic arms. I got back into practice as part of the design technology team at Woods Bagot, where I was primarily concerned with the rationalization of complex, facade geometry and building performance through environmental analysis, custom development of in-house, design automation tools. And it was around that point that, I started to realize that no matter how, miraculous of an automation tool I developed in an architecture firm, it would be limited in its impact and scope by the scope of the contract. As you know, it's a bit siloed in the process. I was looking for somewhere where there could be more control. This is when WeWork was, at the top of their game, and we're recruiting a lot of talent from the AEC industry. So that's really where I got to experiment with vertical integration, where, software development, industrialized construction and unitized prefabrication and even field robotics. So WeWork is where I was first a customer of Spot. And with regards to mobile robotics, at WeWork, we had acquired a few general contracting arms, and there was a gap in the data they had about sites. And we were a data-driven company, so we were looking for better solutions to that. So initially, we were able to do a proof of concept where we used Spot to autonomously go through our sites, take photos, and then upload those through the job site network to our Field Lens application, which we were using for construction site management. And when I realized that all of those things were possible, and the fact that robot with its legs could get anywhere on site that I could, I had a lot of problems with wheeled and tracked robotics. I knew that this was going to have a very significant impact on construction, and that's about the time that I joined Boston Dynamics.
That's interesting. We share a similarity in that we started out in architecture, went to academia, and then kind of chose different career paths as to what the original intention might have been, which is the architectural studio and a practice. What services does Boston Dynamics then currently offer to the construction industry specifically? We know about the Spot robot. I think many of us have seen some interesting videos online about the use of Spot. Could you perhaps elaborate more on that and any other services?
Yeah. Yep. So, we're in the business of selling robots. I work with the Spot robot, which is our quadruped robot. We call it our agile mobile robot to kind of differentiate it from other types of terrestrial robots. Again, just because of the differentiating factor of those legs and its ability to move up and around obstacles and up and down stairs. So when I work with construction customers, I'm the construction technology manager here. I really have two major roles. One is to work directly with the customers to understand their use cases and applications and to make sure that we're developing solutions toward that. But then aided to that, I'm also working with other construction software developers and hardware providers in the ecosystem to make sure that technology is compatible with Spot, such that it's adding value for these use cases. And what we're seeing primarily is this need, just like what I was trying to do at WeWork with Spot, is we're seeing this need for better data capture programs, specifically for interior commercial construction environments. And there really just hasn't been a kind of successful generic mobility solution by which, your favored sensor, such as a 360 camera, 360 video, laser scanner, environmental sensor, thermal imaging, whatever that's important to you to capture data on the job site, can be mounted to this generic mobility solution and kind of get anywhere on the site, either through, direct driving, remote operation, and or autonomous operation. So it's really about that data capture first and foremost. I'd say the two kind of most popular applications are autonomous laser scanning, which leads us kind of to what we've done with our strategic partnership with Trimble. Part of that is that you can get the robot and the X7 laser scanner together from Trimble, early next year. And we've got some early adopters using that technology right now. And then the other application we've seen is kind of job site image documentation. So the idea that you're going to take a series of 360 images, on a daily basis and use that to kind of build a four-dimensional idea of your progress over time. That was really spearheaded by our relationship with HoloBuilder, who built the Spot Walk feature into JobWalk so that you could not only automate the capture of those images, but make sure that they actually get contextualized relative to the drawing sheet. And more recently, we've offered or developed a solution. It was jointly with the GC Brassfield and Gorey, but with Drone Deploy, which makes the Spot robot compatible with their new 360 walkthrough application. So that allows you to take a 360 video stream and then get the IMU from the camera and kind of position that path into an environment. And their environment could be, a drawing sheet, but is more often than not is like a photogrammetric, like 3D model. You can import BIM. So it's, it's slightly differentiated from HoloBuilder. And I think both are really valuable to customers.
It's fascinating that you're approaching it from, first and foremost, it quite rightly makes sense to track and make it data-centric and to track progress on site with the use of Spot, for example. And with that comes, of course, an integral problem or perhaps an issue that robotics is now having to tackle, and that is the issue of battery life. So the expectation with robotics is that these are machines that can operate 24/7, or this is the idealized expectation in many senses. However, the battery life is still quite a common limitation. So how long do they currently last, and where do you think we will be in, let's say, 10 years from now with the battery technology as well?
Yeah, I can just tell you where we'll be in a few months and to better answer that question.
Sure, yeah, that would be
great. Right now, Spot is operated on rechargeable lithium-ion batteries. They have an average runtime of 90 minutes, which means that you're capped to, that requires user intervention at least once every 90 minutes. So that's the most autonomy you can get with batteries. So obviously that was something we wanted to be able to overcome. That was something that even back when I was a customer that I was complaining about. So we have a self-charging dock. The prototype version of that is on customer sites right now being tested. We are developing additional software features in our Spot tablet software and auto walk, autonomous drive software to add in that dock behavior, so how to spot know when its battery is low, and it knows how to return to the dock and understands how to sit on top of the dock. And that's going to be out in Q1 of 2021. So we do not have to wait 10 years for 24/7 autonomy. We just have to wait a few more months, not quite in time for Christmas for most customers. And I think as you mentioned, I mean, it makes it so that you can conceivably have arbitrarily long missions because the robot can know to return to the dock, recharge, and then go out and kind of continue its data capture missions. But I think perhaps more importantly is that you now have a robot that's always on, which means that it can always be listening for commands. So you might decide that you need to, teleoperate it through a space kind of on a moment's notice, or you might want to schedule different types of missions that happen. You might have a job walk that happens at 6 a.m. and you might have another one that happens at 8 p.m. You might have something you want to do during off hours in the middle of the night that would be difficult to do with personnel on site during the day. It really just opens up all sorts of possibilities, and I think kind of more truly captures how people expect to use these robots on the job site.
And I guess with what you were mentioning, they're doing these types of tasks remotely at certain times of the day or night become possible. But also, I guess the conditions are ideal in one sense, given the nature of everybody moving towards remote work. Having Spot on site seems quite smart given the current constraints that we're working under.
I think it's true. COVID has accelerated a lot of technologies that were kind of already in play and already valuable. I mean, even just the notion of more people subscribing to software like HoloBuilder, for example, so that you can virtually access a site and kind of understand the conditions without actually going on site. So yes, in order to keep the kind of density requirements down, this robot has been incredibly useful kind of in adding some help onto the site.
Now, Spot is just one type of robot amongst many others, that exciting ones that Boston Dynamics is developing. Let's talk a little bit more about the future vision of some of the robotics that you guys are working on. So a common concept or a common discussion always centers around whether or not robots are cobots, right? So helping humans and assisting us, or whether or not we are indeed moving towards full autonomy and replacing some of that manual labor. What did those discussions look like at Boston Dynamics, and what are some of the discussions around future of robotics?
Yeah, I think it's industry by industry. And I'll make a slightly pedantic distinction here too, which is, true cobotics, means that a person can also safely operate in the proximity of those robots. You have things like robotic arms that can kind of crash into you and not hurt you. So I would not put Spot into that category. Spot is an industrial robot. It happens to have legs and move around. Yeah, we ask customers respect a kind of 2-meter distance from the robot when its motors are on, just kind of as a safety thing. But more to your point is, we have logistics robots. We have Handle, which is a mobile manipulation robot that can be used to kind of depalletize, move things off shelves, unload trucks, things of that nature. We've actually demonstrated that it can work with other types of logistics robots, like ClearPath Auto AMR robot, which can then take the unloaded items and move them around the factory floor. And when you think about the logistics space, that really is moving toward kind of a lights out, full autonomy scenario, and has been moving in that direction for some time, with things like Amazon's acquiring Kiva Systems and creating Amazon Robotics and creating these fully automated systems. But I don't think that is not the approach I have to construction sites, because they are vastly different from like logistics and even factory environments. I mean, the value proposition of Spot in construction is largely based on the fact that you don't have to change your environment to accommodate automation. This robot will just work in these highly dynamic and challenging environments. But as someone who's both intimately familiar with how construction works and the possibilities, but also the limitations of robotics, is it's really about augmenting the existing workforce. It's about removing people from hazardous situations. It's about taking care of dull, low skill tasks that, they don't really have time for anyway, and freeing up human workers to do kind of higher value or tasks that require more human, cognition or dexterity. So I think my long-term vision in construction isn't necessarily like a lights out site. It'd be like a lights out shift, right? Where there are a lot of things that Spot can do autonomously to help capture data on a daily basis to kind of form a more accurate picture of job site progress, and then to use that picture to inform the scheduling and sequencing of the trades for the following day, to perhaps even assist with the kind of layout and preparation of the site prior to the arrival of workers. So you can start to see there'd be like a hugely symbiotic relationship between the human workers and the kind of automation that happens there that would make those companies, significantly more productive. And Spot can work, around human workers. That is primarily how it's being tested today. It has really sophisticated obstacle avoidance. But I just think that at the end of the day, there's a huge amount of value in full autonomy. So if you can have Spot be doing a lot of the data capture when no one's even on site, I think that's super valuable. And if you also want to be running Spot to perform certain additional tasks, during the day when people are on site, that's possible too.
I think that ultimately, what you talk there about autonomy does lead to a major concern with perhaps a lot of the naysayers in our industry as well, right? Or in a lot of sectors as well, where robotics is displacing human labor. How much do you foresee that human labor can be displaced with robotics in construction sites, given the nature of construction as you described earlier?
I don't think that what we're seeing is job displacement in construction in particular. I think what we're seeing is that construction companies are struggling to get enough people on site, to deliver their projects on time and on budget. So it's really a question of how do we better enable these workers, and again, free them up for more sophisticated tasks. If you look at all of the kind of robots coming online in the construction space, so not just Spot, but we've had recent announcements from Hilti came out of Stealth with their kind of J-bot robot for drilling. Canvas came out of Stealth with their drywall finishing robot. Every single picture of those robots, shows a person operating those robots. It's not about the robot replacing the person. It's about making the person a lot more effective and faster in their ability to do that work. Construction needs to happen in a more organized, higher quality, safer, and faster way for companies to actually deliver on time. That is kind of the huge problem of the industry is no one can deliver a project on time. So we need to get there, and that's really going to enable everyone to do more work with current resources.
And with regards to other areas of impact when transitioning into robotics, is it considered more sustainable to make a move into robotics for construction, given the environmental aspects of energy consumption?
I suspect that a more efficiently run job site is one that has a lot less waste. It comes down to the silliest things sometimes, right? Like you'll have the carpentry trade show up on site that morning, but it turns out that the site's not actually ready for them.
Sure,
so, that's a lot of like wasted fuel in them getting there with their trucks and materials. It's wasted time. And guess what? They can't come back tomorrow. They have to be scheduled. So now you're delayed by, a week or 2 weeks to get them back on site. That's like not even getting into like material consumption and things like that, just the sheer amount of wasted time and logistics that go into that. So yeah, I don't want to like greenwash anything here, but I think when we're speaking about productivity and higher efficiency, ultimately there are going to be some good things environmentally that come along with that.
The other aspect of this, still touching upon the human labor and robotics working together, will robots eventually become I mean, I guess the intention really is to make it cheaper as well in terms of labor for doing some of the tasks, right? So how long do you foresee we have to wait until the cost of robotics is more attainable for companies than having somebody manually do some of these tasks, such as regularly updating site progress notes?
Yeah, I think it can be a dangerous conversation to kind of do a direct, kind of robot to human labor cost analysis, although that's definitely something that is at least initially part of the ROI calculations. My focus is more on what are the opportunities of being more productive, what are the opportunities of being safer, and also if you can collect 100 or 1,000 times more data than you've ever captured before, maybe you've never really captured data before, what are the possibilities of that? That starts to really open the argument. The problem with the labor side of things is, yes, the robot is actually already at a pretty reasonable price and will continue to get cheaper. The more we make, the more, we improve the mass manufacturing efforts, the more affordable these robots will be, and the more of them you'll see on job sites, and that will be a positive feedback loop. But the cost of labor is different from region to region. So obviously in North America and Germany and Japan, the cost of labor can be very high. So that is going to be at the forefront of people's minds when they're thinking about automation. But there are countries where labor is not well compensated, and therefore that will never be a rational argument to have. If you're just thinking about the cost of labor, there are regions, somewhat unfortunately, where they pay very low and they could throw as many people at a problem as they'd like to. So I think it's the wrong conversation to have, and it also runs the risk of devaluing the labor of people, which is hugely valuable. Again, like the more I work with robots, the more I'm, the robots that we have are the most sophisticated robots in the world, and they blow my mind every day with what they can do, but they're still just robots. They don't touch human capability. Working with robots has really kind of made a newfound appreciation in my mind of
human intelligence.
How amazing like humans are. It's really incredible. There's nothing that we know of in the universe quite like it. So so I think that labor on site is really valuable. My mission is to augment that and for that to always be the central story. And robots are really there to be a new tool in the tool belt of these workers, so to speak. So
with some of the robots such as Spot, I take it that the owner of that robot would be the contractor. So who ultimately owns the robot? Is it the contractor who purchases it, or can they also be leased, for instance? What does the ownership of a robot look like?
Yeah, so we started our early adopter program in January of this year, which seems like 10 years ago because of COVID. And that was a lease program because we wanted to, recognize that the customers were taking a leap of faith with us and they were contributing their time and energy to validating that the robot was useful. And, when it turned out that it was quite useful for them, then we moved to a sales model. So I forget exactly when now, actually, but at some point, I think over the summer, we started selling the robots directly to customers, starting in North America. Now we actually have sales open up, fairly globally now, not everywhere in the world, but in quite a few places, including getting the CE marking in Europe, so that we can sell directly to Europe now. So it's primarily a sales model. You can go on to shop.bostondynamics.com and you can buy a robot off the internet, which I think is really cool. We have e-commerce for legged robots now. Who would have thought? And I think most of the people in AEC who are buying them are either developers in that space who are looking to augment the robot with additional hardware or software services for the construction industry. But I'd say the vast majority of them are general contractors, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are the most fully incentivized and motivated to run a tight ship on the job site. Sure. And that's what this robot is most helpful with. So
perhaps another thing that might prevent the adoption of robotics on site will relate to health and safety. And you quite rightfully mentioned this as well, that these are industrial robots. So today, if there's an incident on site, with plant and machinery. In majority of the cases, it is the operator or the contractor who's liable and responsible. So does the health and safety aspect with regards to robotics deter contractors from adopting robots on site?
No, it hasn't really been an issue. I mean, first, we take safety very seriously. I mean, that is always the primary conversation we have with customers. But oftentimes, the purchase of the robot is itself a move to enhance safety on sites. It is a mechanism by which, humans can be removed from potentially hazardous situations. So it's actually adding to the safety of job sites by having the robots around. Now, in terms of the operational safety concerns, sure, there are rigorous kind of user terms and safety standards around that. We always work directly with the customer. The nice thing about working with general contractors is they already have really rigorous safety standards on site.
Yeah.
Thanks to OSHA and similar things in other regions. And, we review their kind of concept of operations and their safety programs with respect to the robot. And then those things get, implemented. And, a lot of it is just maintaining a safe distance from the robot when in operation. And some of it's just mundane stuff too. Like we provide, these kind of ergonomic straps to make sure that when you lift the robot, you can lift it properly with respect to your back and you can keep your hands free of any pinch points. We definitely cover all of those things. And then just making sure that good decisions are made during the operation of the robot on site. I think that, in terms of the socialization of the robot on site, people just want to understand what the robot does.
Yeah.
They want to understand its kind of strengths and limitations. That makes it more predictable to them. And when they realize that it's, essentially an autonomous data capture sensor, a very fancy laser scanner or camera that can move around the site, I think there's comfort with it. You just let people know, hey, this is the pathway the robot's going to take at this particular time of day. Please give it the right of way. Hey, if you forget and you step out in front of the robot, no problem. It's going to stop and wait for you to get out of the way. But best practice is just to give it right of way. And, I think we've been pretty successful with that. And again, I'd emphasize that we learn a lot from our customers. Right? I come from the construction industry, and I'm meant to lend that expertise to our operations here at Boston Dynamics. But we stay humble, and we know that our strength is robots. We want to learn as much as possible from our customers, and they've been very gracious in working with us to develop better safety.
Okay, that sounds good. And the other aspect about the timing of the solution that you're describing, so with Spot and other robotics, so we know that timing is quite important with the success of many companies, and we can take the example of Air BnB, for instance, or WeWork, even as you mentioned before. So, for instance, in the UK, we have the Brexit looming upon us, and we've seen that already has reduced the amount of skilled workers on site. But in general, as you mentioned as well, there is a reduction in the number of skilled workers on site. So how does this timing bode for the solutions that Boston Dynamics is offering?
Yeah. I love that you asked this question. I actually haven't interacted with this particular question before. Skilled labor comes from it's even more difficult to get skilled labor, then yes. I think that those conditions will then demand other solutions from the market, because there will be problems of productivity, there will be labor shortages, and robotics are definitely something that can help alleviate that. And without getting too political, I think legislation and policy should be the first things that are used to alleviate that. But failing that, yes, I think robotics can assist.
And finally, a heartfelt thank you to all of our followers who have been with us so far. If you enjoyed this episode, then please follow us on LinkedIn or YouTube. And better yet, share this episode with your friends and colleagues.